Bureau, as well as our consent docket, and also our diversion services. She also, if you wouldn't mind giving her a hand, she put together this PowerPoint for me. And she did a much better job than I could have done, so thank you, Alyssa. She's definitely our Jane of all trades. Next is Jen Daly, and Jen by far has the most experience because she spent so much time in front of the court before coming to the good side of the court, and that would be juvenile court, to work with our delinquent youth. She was able to transfer a lot of her skills in working with parents and families to working with our youth. And I think she also has some of her experience from managing her husband for the past few decades. So. And then last we have Devin Jones, and Devin spent 7 years at Kent County Detention before coming here to work with our kids, and does a great job managing our home intensive care caseload along with Jen Daly. So I'm really proud of our crew here. They do a really good job for us. So how do youth get before the probation department or before the court? And I apologize because some of you, this will be review for you, and some of you, maybe it's a little bit of new information, but youth can come before the court either for status offenses, so that would be like incorrigible or truancy, meaning they could be charged with incorrigibility. I cannot because I'm over 18 now, even though I am a little bit incorrigible. And then they can also be charged with criminal behavior, and we get both before the court. Assaults are common. Unfortunately, criminal sexual conduct is common. We see a lot of those. We see a fair number of computer crimes, and those have gone up a lot, obviously, in the past 10 years. So we handle all of those case types from the low end to the very high end. I want to talk a little bit about the formal process first. Typically, youth will be charged with a crime by the prosecuting attorney. So the prosecuting attorney will file a petition, and that petition will be set for preliminary hearing in front of our juvenile court referee. And at that hearing, if the referee finds probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, then she'll go ahead and assign that juvenile to pretrial supervision, and that could be either investigation, which is kind of our low level of pretrial supervision, or home intensive care, which is our higher level of pretrial supervision. Home intensive care would be for those more serious crimes or youth who present with a lot of concerns at the preliminary hearing. So after that, a caseworker is assigned, and one of the most important things we do as a probation staff is administer a risk needs assessment. And one thing I forgot to say is I get tired of just listening to myself talk after a while, so if you have questions, make sure you raise your hand or just holler them out and we can have a conversation. We have a fairly small crew, so I think we can get away with doing that. But we administer a risk and needs assessment tool, and for us that's the youth level of service. It's a 41 question screener, and it covers several different life domains for the kids. So it covers their family life, it covers previous criminal history, substance abuse, peer relations, attitudes, values, and beliefs, education, and a couple of other categories. So what we're looking at is if we have a youth who scores high in several of those categories, we know that they're going to be a higher risk youth. They're more likely to recidivate, and that's what we're trying to mitigate. We're trying to minimize that risk. So if they score out high risk, we're probably going to recommend that at their next hearing that they be placed in our home intensive care program, and that would require more intensive services, more contacts from caseworkers, a higher level of supervision, possibly the tether, because they are a higher risk youth. So that's the risk part of it. But then there's also the criminogenic needs or criminogenic factors piece of that. So let's say we have a youth who has a lot of trouble in school and is a regular substance abuser. So they drink a lot, for example, but they do well at home and they have a lot of pro-social values, not a whole lot of criminal values. We're probably going to put them in programming that addresses the school needs and the substance abuse needs. But we're probably not going to require the family to do family counseling if the family unit is intact, parents are able to manage behavior in the home, etc. So we look at those things. We don't just throw all the services we can at a youth because that can actually make them worse. So that's the need piece. We also address responsivity factors. Has anyone heard of responsivity factors in the room other than the POs? Yeah, okay, Cheryl, thank you. So responsivity deals with how a youth is able to receive their treatment. If we have a youth who has ADHD, they struggle with impulsivity, or perhaps their cognitive level of functioning is lower than some other youth, they're going to need a different style of treatment delivery than a youth who has perhaps a bit higher intelligence or does not struggle with impulsive behavior. So we need to take that into account. We also take into account protective factors. So if we have a youth who comes in and perhaps they committed a serious crime, but they also work 20 hours a week and they're involved in sports, we're going to want to be careful to not disrupt those protective factors, because if we do, it might actually increase their likelihood of criminal behavior. So we address all of those things, and all of those things go together in a treatment plan, and that eventually comes out in a disposition report. That report is provided to the attorney, the judge, the prosecuting attorney, and the family. And actually, as caseworkers, we work with the family to come up with those plans. And so we may set goals based on criminogenic factors, and then we may have certain interventions. And I'll talk about our programming in a little bit, but those go into recommendations to the judge, and typically the judge adopts those recommendations as court orders. So that's kind of how the formal process works. I know that's a really quick summary, but we don't have a ton of time, and sometimes I talk too much. Level of supervision we talked about, risk and needs we talked about. See, I forgot my clicker. Informal court programs. Yes, sir.
When you're bringing a kid in and doing those screeners and all that preliminary stuff, are most kids pretty resistant? Are some glad for the help? What do you find?
Well, as far as, I guess there's different levels of resistance. As far as, say, a refusal to complete the screen, that's extremely rare. The referee typically does order that, but as we all know, court orders don't mean a whole lot to our kids in these cases, right? But typically, once the caseworkers, they're excellent at developing a relationship, and I can't remember the last time a youth refused to screen. It's happened, but it's rare. There's different levels of resistance, though, as in youth may lie their way through the assessment. So it's very important for us then to make sure we're gathering information from schools, from counselors, from parents, etc., so we get a full picture rather than the picture the child wants us to. Does that answer it, or?
Yes, well, and then beyond that, like as you begin to implement some supports, do you get kids who are like, oh, thank God, finally somebody's helping me? You're like, I'm not going to do your stupid program.
They just do it.
They just do it.
They don't, like anybody, if you're in trouble or somebody is trying to correct something and because they're juveniles, I mean, they do it, but very rarely do they say, that was so helpful or anything like that. But they do it, and you see how you see improvements in the wild. We reassess them every 90 days. So you see improvements if it's helping or not. So they might not be grateful, but when needs start going down, the risks start going down, then you see that it's improvement.
It's kind of like therapy. You may not see the benefits of it immediately, but the benefits may come 5 years down the road. And the other thing to remember, and I don't want to be a Debbie Dave Downer or a Dave Downer, but even the most effective programming that we have only reduces the level of recidivism by around 30-35% according to research. And you probably heard the same thing, but that's significant. It's just that not everyone is going to benefit.
I have a gal, she's been on for 2 years, and she'll be off after 18 birthday. Now, she still has a lot of the same issues. However, she has not ran away, and she has not had a new charge in a year. That's huge. Huge. So you.
We measure success in strange ways, is what we say. So, informal court programs, these are front-end services of ours that we're really proud of. The Youth Service Bureau, I think most of you who have been around for a while are familiar with that. We've restarted that with, under the watchful eye of Alyssa. And I was gonna have a picture of Alyssa up here, but somehow it didn't make it into the PowerPoint. I don't know why. I'm not sure how that happened. But it's a voluntary service, and referrals can come in from parents, from schools, from prosecuting attorney, from law enforcement. Really, anyone who wants to refer a youth can do that because it's a voluntary service. So if the parents and youth don't want the service, they're not going to receive that. It's a front end, it's voluntary. Diversion we also do, and in Berry County, there's different ways to do it, but in Berry, we sometimes divert cases post-petition, meaning perhaps the youth comes in for a preliminary hearing and the parties talk and decide, hey, this is an appropriate candidate for diversion. We don't really want this youth to go on the formal calendar. We don't want an adjudication for this youth. Perhaps it's an 11-year-old with a domestic in the home. And we know that we can put services in place and it doesn't require that formal court intervention. Those would be some cases where we might utilize diversion. Consent calendar is our most formal level of informal supervision, meaning, and it's very frequent that our youth are placed on consent calendar. This is really just informal probation. So youth comes in, they have their preliminary hearing, they're assigned usually to investigation, they're assigned to caseworker. The caseworker completes the assessment and the youth scores out low risk or maybe low moderate risk, and they're a first-time offender. So we realize that it's not likely this youth is going to come back into court if we address that one or two specific criminogenic factors that brought them in the first place. So this consent calendar contract here is something that Alyssa created, and it's modeled after how we used to do consent here, meaning the youth need to complete items on that contract in order to work their way off of probation. And those low-risk youth with family support, they typically do well. They complete these contracts. In fact, I think Jen has one who completed his contract almost before he was placed on consent calendar because he realized he really screwed up. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to take care of business and be done with the court process. So he did that. And consent calendar from a legal aspect, the adjudication or the charge in general only shows up to certain agencies. So like Michigan State Police will see it, but in general, if someone calls the court and says, hey, does this youth have a record? We would say, there's no public record. I can't disclose anything about whether there's a record or not. It's consent calendar. So court services. That's a great picture, Tiffany, so thanks for letting us put that up there, Tiffany. Tiffany is our wraparound coordinator, and so we have at our table a whole lot of wraparound power because we have Cheryl on one side and Tiffany on the other. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about wraparound because they can tell you a whole lot better. I think most of you are familiar with the program. It's offered through mental health and through the court. And it's something that we want to continue to increase utilization of because we know the need is out there. Moral recognition therapy, yes, the middle word is a name of a made-up word. So conation, thought, and then it's reconation. So changing the way that people think. That was developed in the prison system, but it was adapted for juveniles. It's a 12-step program, and it involves community service aspect, it involves repairing relationships, identifying errors in thinking. And for our kids, all of our caseworkers are MRT facilitators now. And I would say it takes the kids, 5 or 6 months to complete MRT on average. Am I being optimistic?
Depends.
So I facilitated for 13, 14 years, and typically that's what it took my
I
kids.
think the minimum would be 4 months, because you can pass a step every week.
Yeah.
Step 1 is the hardest, and that always takes a couple of weeks, and then holidays, things like that. So if you're a kid that's just gonna come in and take care of business, 4 months, otherwise 6 months.
Yeah. Yep. Coping with anger, I love that picture too. Coping with anger is a new program. Alyssa found that and arranged to have herself trained in that. So that's another service that we provide for youth who have difficulty managing their feelings, is how I might phrase it. Other services, we're a rural county, and I know we say that a lot. Our service array can be limited, but in some ways I think we do really well here. But be that as it may, we do utilize a lot of online services to address needs that maybe aren't otherwise met in the community. So Stoplifting, that's a Third Millennium Classroom online program to deal with, you guessed it, shoplifting. Respect and Resolve and conflict-wise for conflict, obviously. Under the influence of marijuana 101, let's say we have youth with transportation issues, or maybe a youth who's placed out of county. We can't get them to counseling appointments here or to address substance abuse here. We can at least provide that as an option for them. Alive at 25 is something that I found when I was in Van Buren. It addresses driving-related offenses. I believe it's still based out of Maine, so it's an online thing, but it's live. So when I was looking into it, I wanted to sit through a class and see what it actually entailed, to see if I wanted my probationers to do it or not. And I actually got reprimanded by the instructor because she caught me not paying attention. So I know that they require the youth to pay attention in the class. It's not like they can shut their camera off. So I got a kick out of that. We also offer the tether, and it's not like an old school tether where they needed a phone line. It's a GPS tracker, and we can also set up exclusion zones. So let's say we have a youth who offended sexually and his victim is at a certain address, and we want to make sure they don't visit that address. And we haven't had this lately, but or let's say they made a school threat and their threat was at such and such a school, we can set up an exclusion zone where we get an alert if the youth enters that zone. And I use that frequently in my old life as a probation officer. So we have that capability. There are new tethers out now that actually yell at the kids for you, and I was considering using those. And I don't mean like yell at, but I mean if they leave their zone, it will start talking to them and tell them to return to their zone, etc. So I kind of got to pick up that. So some specifics regarding our community service programming. Again, the caseworkers get all the credit on this because they do a fantastic job of setting up community service with areas like Village of Freeport and City of Hastings are the ones listed there. But they go out and do these groups with the kids on, typically it's Saturdays, unless it's in the summer, then sometimes it'll be during the week. And they're out there working with the kids. I think it's a fantastic way to build relationships and also to get their community service done. In addition to that, we've started a new program that I just call community service for restitution because I didn't know what else to call it. What we do is the youth can complete community service and get paid for it. Now this isn't their court-ordered community service, they have to do it separately. But they can get paid minimum wage for their community service, but that payment goes directly to the victim. So it's kind of like 3 wins. The community gets a service, the child gets their restitution paid, and the victim actually gets paid their restitution, which is something, it's difficult for a 13, 14, 15-year-olds to get jobs and actually pay restitution. So that's a partnership with our 501c3. That's where the funding comes from for that. So
if any of your agencies, or if you guys know any service that would like community service, it doesn't always have to be a group project, or sometimes people are worried about who's gonna supervise. We would be willing to supervise that, even if it's for 1 kid or 2 kids or 15 kids. So reach out to myself or any of the probation officers, or even get a hold of Dave and he can direct it. We're always looking for places to do community service. We lost a lot of places when COVID hit, and so any place you guys are aware of, please let us know.
So local partnerships, we really value, and I don't see Bree, Abby, or Liz here today, but we've really appreciated their partnership with us in delivering substance abuse treatment for our kids. But obviously we partner with community mental health. We partner with private providers for counseling. We do whatever we can to draw services in. We, as caseworkers, we're kind of blinkers and coordinators for our youth. And so whatever service we can find, we're going to try to utilize. And then I think probably a real big highlight for this year, at least that's my hope, is the bringing Lighthouse Academy on board and into Berry County. We noticed last year, and this has been a problem for a long time, but last year we began talking again about how many of our youth on probation are either expelled from school, long-term suspended, or schools boot them out and require them to do virtual learning. And as we know, many of the kids that we have in front of the court don't do well with virtual learning, or they don't do it at all. And these kids don't go anywhere in our communities, they stay with us. So we need to figure out how to educate them. And Lighthouse provides service to Kent County, Ottawa County, Muskegon County, and now they're going to provide service to Berry County, and that's a partnership with Kellogg Community College, who has provided space for us to have a classroom for them. Rich Franklin has been super helpful in helping coordinate things and linking us up with providers who can get the kids fed, can help get them transported to school. So it's been a really great thing thus far. Our hope is to start by the end of July already. It's a year-round school with maybe 3 or 4 weeks off during the summer, but otherwise it's year-round. So very, very excited about that. Good progress in that arena.
Dave, you mind if I chime in?
Please chime in.
So this is a dream that's been a long time coming. Inez and Jan were working on this years ago, like several years pre-COVID. And we took field trips to Ingham County to see what they had going on, and to one of the Lighthouse programs up in Kent County, and you know, trying to figure out how the heck are people paying for this stuff, and how are they making it work. And I'm sure I'll miss lots of important players, but in addition to those two, I have always believed that Judge Doherty was very supportive and had a lot to do with the energy behind this, saying, you know, look, I know the kids that are going to come in that I'm going to see on this end. What can we do to change that trajectory? But I have to say how awesome it was and I missed a lot of kids' network meetings because they ended up falling on another meeting that I had. And I came to one and they were talking about this, and I said, what? It's finally going to happen? So Dave,
Yes.
kudos to you. The energy, the push to get it there, instead of just being an idea, this is huge. This baby's been a long time coming.
No, and we work for Dave, and we know, right away, he got a hold of people, all the players, and so we appreciate that, Dave, greatly.
It was many hands. The future of juvenile justice. So, I don't want to beat a dead horse too much on juvenile justice reform. I think many of you have heard me talk about it before. But I will just touch on it because it is impacting our court, and I think largely in a positive way. It didn't start that way. A couple years ago, Cornelius Frederick was killed and restrained at Lakeside Academy. So that coupled with, in Lakeside Academy is a residential program, or was, for delinquent youth. And in addition to that, there was a news story about a girl who had supposedly been locked up for just being truant. on the east side of the state. Of course, the news didn't get it all right, but those were a couple of stories that proved to be a catalyst, or a couple of events that proved to be a catalyst for the convening of a juvenile justice reform task force by the governor, and that happened a couple of years ago. And as courts, honestly, we weren't too excited about that initially because we knew all of the good work that was being done in courts all over the state of Michigan. But we knew that change was coming, whether we were a part of it or not. So we made sure that we as courts were a part of the change happening. And I think ultimately the changes that have happened as a result of that juvenile justice reform are good, meaning we now have increased funding for community-based programming. Our reimbursement rate from the state used to be 50%. It's now 75% for community-based programs, which is fantastic. We are required to complete certain assessments for you when they come in. But the neat thing is, in very, Inez and Jan and those who came before me, they were forward thinkers, and we already have most of what's required for the reform in place. So there's really no concern for us there. Our emphasis is going to continue to be utilizing programming that we know works, that we can demonstrate that works. Because our goal, again, is to not bring more kids into the court. We want to make it so that kids and families don't need the court for support. So, I just wanted that picture in there. Who drives the bus of juvenile justice reform? The court does. I think I mentioned that. I don't want to end on a bad note, so I'm not going to touch on this a whole lot other than we really need good, qualified candidates to work in the courts still. So if you know of any young ones who would be good, and you know what, I forgot to mention Gracie. I didn't mean to call you out, but now I'm calling you out, I guess. Gracie McCarty is our court intern for the summer. Hi, Gracie. And so welcome, Gracie. Thanks for coming to the community breakfast. But we need people like Gracie to come and work with our youth. So there's my plug for that. And then highlights. I wanted to make sure we highlight the fact that Jen Daly hasn't retired yet. That's awesome. We got a bunch of fantastic new caseworkers. We've got a lot of excellent programming, and I talked about the other things. So I think so far so good. If you have questions or concerns about anything that you see going on at the court, I always have an open door. Judge Doherty has an open door, so make sure you come and talk to us. With that, I think we get to open it up for questions.
Schools for 8 years, and I'm just I love all the restorative justice type practices that you're doing. I think it's really progressive. We struggle a little bit with truancy issues still. I'm just curious how that system works. I mean, you don't always want to be punitive. We're trying to be more positive and proactive and finding out why kids aren't coming to school. But how does that work with the courts? Is there still a pathway for it to go to the courts if it gets to that?
Great question. There's a couple of different pathways to take. Alyssa, through YSB, handles a lot of our truancy issues. So schools can refer directly to YSB for truancy,
And that's the YSB is?
Youth Service Bureau.
Okay.
Yep, and if you want to talk to me afterward, I'll be happy to get your information and email you stuff.
Okay.
But Alyssa, sitting right by you there, is our YSB worker. She's the master of all things YSB. So what Alyssa does is she contacts the family and she does just what you're saying. She tries to identify those drivers for why the youth aren't going to school. And then she tries to help them address those. So that's one way. Now, there may also be a time when there's a petition filed, a truancy petition, and it comes before the court. Now, at that point, it can still be diverted and handled informally. Or if there are other issues that need to be addressed in the home, let's say that perhaps the court needs to order some sort of family or parenting intervention of some sort, it's possible that case still goes formal. I can tell you that it's very rare that almost never would the judge lock a kid up for not going to school anymore. That's not, well, it doesn't work long-term. It'll work short-term. The kid, you can make the kid go to school when they're in detention, but then when they come out, they don't usually go. So, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know just one case where it was the parents and the mom eventually, she went to jail for a couple of days. Yeah, but but we did everything before. Rehabilitate them. But that's the only one I've ever heard of.
And it's been a huge struggle. It was getting bad before COVID, but COVID made things that much worse with regard to the truancy issue. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, I don't think, because we see it all the time as caseworkers. Families who pull their kids out to attend virtual school as well, and then nothing is getting learned. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank
Okay, on your tables are, what do we call these?
you. Feedback forms?
Feedback sheets, there you go. So please fill out the feedback sheet. We're especially interested in what services or supports or programs you'd like to hear more about, what are helpful to you in your work. So make some notes for the committee so we can be sure to invite those people as speakers in the future. The next breakfast, we meet quarterly. The next community breakfast will be August 21st. Save that date on your calendar. And eat more food before you leave, or wrap some in a napkin and take it with you. And we'll see you in August. Thank you.
Sure.